I straightened my silk blouse and glanced out the floor-to-ceiling window of my office. The sprawling green of my farmland stretched below, dotted with neat rows of organic vegetables and solar-paneled greenhouses. From up here, it all looked serene, almost unreal, but I knew better. I'd built this empire from stubborn soil, sweat, and a lot of doubters who laughed at my so-called tiny hobby farm. The buzz of my phone pulled me from the view. An unfamiliar number flashed. A message from the Wilsons, people who had once mocked my little farm as childish dreams at our high school reunion. Now, their email was formal, almost hesitant. They wanted to meet, supposedly to discuss a potential collaboration. My fingers hovered over the screen. Pride and irony tangled in my chest. The same people who laughed at my calloused hands and dirt-stained boots now wanted my help supplying their restaurants. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of my desk, noticing the faint scratch where I'd dropped a brass seed packet last week. My mind flashed briefly to all the nights I had spent kneeling in mud, checking irrigation lines by flashlight, wondering if anyone would ever take me seriously. And yet here I was, standing in a glass tower above the land that once seemed too small to matter. I tapped a quick reply, careful, controlled. I wouldn't let them see my heart race. My triumph was mine to savor first. Let them feel the weight of what they'd missed. The irony, the validation, the quiet satisfaction. I was 17, the first time they really laughed at me. My hands, still rough from a summer spent planting tomatoes and harvesting kale on my grandmother's farm, trembled as I carried a basket of freshly picked produce to the front porch. My parents, my older brother Jake, and my so-called friends gathered there, smirking at the sight. "Seriously, Sarah, who even wants to eat vegetables straight from the dirt?" my brother had said, shaking his head. "You're wasting your time. You should be thinking about college, parties, real life." I felt the lump form in my throat, a mix of shame and defiance. My cheeks burned, but I held my chin high. I had spent all summer learning from Grandma May, who ran this farm with a stubborn pride I secretly adored. She had slipped me a small brass packet of heirloom seeds the night before. "Plant what you believe in, Sarah," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Even if they laugh, even if they doubt, one day, you'll see who is wrong." The words wrapped around me like a lifeline. I wanted to cry, to scream, to vanish into the house, but I remembered her eyes, bright, unyielding. And in that moment, I made a choice. I would stay. I would grow something real, something that could never be taken lightly. So I did. I refused the easy path to conformity. I refused to leave the farm to join my classmates at summer parties or city internships. Every seed I planted felt like a tiny rebellion, every sprout a whisper to the world that I belonged here, and I was capable of more than anyone had ever imagined. That night, under the soft glow of lanterns in the barn, I promised myself I'd prove them wrong, not with words, but with the fruits of my labor. After that summer, I threw myself into the farm with a stubborn obsession. I sought out workshops on sustainable agriculture, watched countless webinars late at night, and experimented with irrigation, soil rotation, and heirloom crops. Money was tight, and every setback stung, but I learned quickly that patience was part of the harvest. I met Claire Donovan, a seasoned organic farm owner from Vermont, at a regional farmers conference. She saw the determination behind my dirt-streaked smile and offered guidance that changed everything. "You've got the vision, Sarah," she said one evening over tea in a barn-turned office. "Now you need strategy." Claire introduced me to niche markets, local chefs, and small grocery chains willing to take a chance on a scrappy new supplier. My first profitable sale felt unreal. 20 crates of mixed greens delivered to a restaurant downtown. I remember the owner's delighted face as he tasted the first harvest. That moment validated years of solitude, sweat, and whispered doubts to myself when no one else would listen. The work was grueling. Early mornings, endless weeding, and nights spent budgeting by candlelight tested me more than any high school mockery ever had. Sometimes, I cried in the greenhouse, wondering if I'd made the right choice, but every successful harvest brought a quiet, burning satisfaction. I was proving to myself that a woman could stand alone, take risks, and thrive in a world that constantly underestimated her. To the outside world, I posted quaint updates about simple farm life on social media, hiding the real scale of my operations. Behind the scenes, I was building a network, cold calling distributors, negotiating contracts, investing in greenhouses and trucks, and branding my farm produce for larger markets. I kept my family in the dark, partly out of pride, partly to protect myself from their inevitable judgment. By the time I turned 25, the farm was no longer just a dream. It was an enterprise. The small patch of land Grandma May had left me had blossomed into acres of organic vegetables, herbs, and fruits, supplying boutique grocery stores and high-end restaurants. And all the while, I remembered her words, "Plant what you believe in." Every success was a quiet tribute to her and a promise that the girl they laughed at would never be small again. It was a bright Saturday morning when the Wilsons arrived, expecting the same girl they had mocked years ago. My hands, though calloused, were manicured neatly, my jeans tucked into polished boots. I greeted them at the edge of the main field, where the rows of kale and heirloom tomatoes glimmered in the sun. The Wilsons exchanged awkward glances, their smiles forced. They hadn't expected the fleet of branded delivery trucks parked near the barn, each bearing the logo I had designed myself. The greenhouses behind me were state-of-the-art, temperature-controlled, with solar panels glinting in the early light. I could see the surprise flicker in their eyes as they took in the sight. "Wow, this is amazing," Mr. Wilson finally managed, voice catching on the words. I led them through the barn-turn processing facility, pointing out the drying racks, the cold storage units, and the small but efficient packaging line. Every corner bore evidence of months and years of planning, strategy, and sheer determination. I watched them closely, letting them soak it all in. Then I stopped in my office, walls lined with awards and framed photos of my team at farmers markets, sustainability conferences, and charity events. I gestured for them to sit. "I'm the supplier for 3 regional food chains and half a dozen high-end restaurants," I said, letting the words settle. "I oversee every shipment, every contract, every decision. The farm isn't a hobby, it's my livelihood, my brand, and my legacy." They blinked. Shock replaced their forced smiles. Mr. Wilson coughed, unable to speak, while Mrs. Wilson looked like she wanted to apologize and had no words for it. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who called my hands peasant hands and my dreams childish now relied on the produce I grew with those very hands. I let a pause hang in the room, savoring it. They could see the girl they thought was small and insignificant, but they couldn't see the countless nights, the failures, the grit, the sweat, the persistence that had built this empire. I watched their disbelief morph into awe and, perhaps, a hint of shame. Finally, I smiled. "So yes," I said softly but firmly, "you eat what I grow, and you'll respect it just as you should have all those years ago." With the room still heavy with their shock, I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my words settle. For years, they had believed they held the upper hand in every conversation about my life. Not anymore. Now I had the choice, to punish, to ignore, or to guide. "I'm willing to help," I said slowly, "but only if you respect the rules of this farm and the work that goes into it." I listed the conditions clearly. Jake, my older brother, had to spend a season working alongside me, understanding the labor, the patience, the responsibility it takes to grow something meaningful. Mrs. Wilson needed to learn sustainable sourcing practices before expecting me to supply her restaurants. Mr. Wilson had to commit to ethical business agreements, no shortcuts, no arrogance. Each condition carried an unspoken lesson: humility, patience, respect, and accountability. I wasn't just teaching them how to handle vegetables or contracts. I was teaching them to confront their own pride and ignorance. I could see their eyes widen as they realized this wasn't a game or a favor. This was about growth, emotional, personal, and professional. I added one more requirement. Any collaboration with my farm would include a portion dedicated to community outreach. The same people who once mocked rural life would now invest time and resources into the communities they had dismissed. I watched their expressions change, first hesitation, then understanding, a hint of admiration. "Help comes with responsibility," I said, standing up to walk them through the greenhouse one last time. "You want access to what I've built? You follow the rules. You earn it. No shortcuts, no old patterns, no dismissive attitudes. Just respect." I could feel the shift. Where once they had held arrogance over me, now I held the authority. I wasn't cruel or vengeful. I was firm and fair. And in that firmness, I felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes when someone finally recognizes the value you've always known you had. Months later, I watched them genuinely change. Jake, my brother, no longer mocked the farm life. He spent early mornings planting, learning the rhythm of the soil, and even laughed at himself when he overwatered the tomato seedlings. The Wilsons embraced the lessons too, attending workshops I hosted, learning the care behind sustainable sourcing, and sharing their newfound respect with their teams. I stood in the central greenhouse one afternoon, the warm sun filtering through the glass panels, and ran my fingers over the brass packet of heirloom seeds Grandma May had given me years ago. Each seed now seemed heavier with meaning, a reminder of resilience, patience, and belief. That little packet had guided me from the girl who was ridiculed to the woman who stood confidently at the helm of an empire she had built with her own hands. I thought about all the nights I had doubted myself, the times I had worked alone under a blanket of stars, wondering if the world would ever see my value. And now, the farm thrived, my team thrived, and those who had once laughed were learning to respect what had always been theirs to see: the dedication, the craft, and the unwavering spirit of someone who refused to be small. Standing there, I breathed in the aroma of fresh basil and ripe tomatoes, feeling a deep sense of closure. This was not about revenge, it was about transformation, about watching pride evolve into understanding, about knowing that the journey, the struggle, and the love for the land had created a woman who could command respect without anger, who could nurture success without compromise. I smiled, planting a new row of heirloom seeds in the corner of the field, a gesture both symbolic and literal. And as the sun dipped low, I whispered to the wind, letting my voice carry across the farmland. "They mocked my farm. Now they eat what I grow."